Owning a gold mine can bankrupt you even when the gold is real. A deposit holding 1 million ounces, worth over $2 billion at $2,000 an ounce, can still lose money on every ton it digs. Around 90% of exploration discoveries never become working mines, and a drop from 3 grams of gold per ton to 1 gram can flip a fortune into ruin. So why does buried treasure so often stay buried? The answer starts with a number that humbles everyone who hears it. Gold in the ground is not measured in glittering bars. It is measured in grams per ton. A ton of ore is 1,000 kilograms of rock, and inside that rock, the gold is invisible, scattered in specks too small to see. An average open-pit mine works ore grading around 1 gram per ton. Underground mines chase richer veins, 5 to 10 grams per ton. That is the whole prize. Sit with what 1 gram per ton actually means. You break, haul, crush, and process a full ton of stone, and the gold you pull out weighs less than a wedding ring. The band on someone's finger can hold more metal than an entire truckload of ore. Consider the Grasberg mine in Indonesia, which moves more than 200,000 tons of rock every single day to feed its mills. Or South Africa's Mponeng, the deepest mine on Earth at roughly 4 kilometers down, where the rock temperature reaches 60 degrees Celsius and refrigerated air must be pumped underground just to keep workers alive. Everything else, all 1,000 kilograms of it, is worthless rock that must still be moved and dumped. This is the central paradox of the business. The gold is real. The rock is the problem. That problem begins long before any rock is broken, because first you have to find the gold at all. Exploration is where fortunes are burned in the dark. Geologists drill diamond core holes deep into the earth, pulling up cylinders of stone to read like pages of a book. Each metra of that drilling costs roughly $100 to $400, and a single prospect can swallow thousands of metras. A deep hole 2 kilometers down can cost $500,000 on its own, and it may hit nothing. Companies drill in patterns, first spacing holes hundreds of meters apart, then tightening to 50 or even 25 meters where the gold appears, each round of infill drilling multiplying the bill. Those meters add up to budgets that would build a skyscraper. Exploration campaigns routinely run $10 to $50 million, spent entirely before a single ounce is ever sold. The Fruta del Norte deposit in Ecuador consumed hundreds of millions in exploration and legal wrangling across nearly 2 decades between its discovery in 2006 and steady production, changing hands between companies before London Gold finally poured gold in late 2019. And here is the brutal arithmetic of the hunt. Only about 1 in 1,000 mineral prospects ever becomes a working mine. That is not a risky bet. That is a near certain loss, chased anyway because the rare winner pays for all the failures. When a prospect survives that gauntlet, the scattered drill holes have to be turned into something a bank will believe. This is the work of the resource geologist, who stitches isolated points of data into a 3-dimensional picture of the buried deposit. The estimate is not a guess. It is governed by strict reporting codes, JARSC in Australia and NI 43101 in Canada, written to stop companies from lying about what they have. These codes were born from disaster. The 1997 Bre-X scandal, where a Canadian company salted its core samples with shaved gold and claimed a Busang deposit in Borneo held 70 million ounces, wiped out roughly $6 billion in shareholder value when the fraud collapsed. The modern reporting rules exist precisely so that a Bre-X can never happen again. Those codes force honesty by ranking confidence in plain tiers. The lowest is inferred, gold suspected from thin data. Above it sits indicated, and at the top measured, where drilling is dense enough to trust. But even a measured resource is not money yet. Only the portion that can actually be mined at a profit earns the word reserve. Resource is what nature put there. Reserve is what you can sell. The gap between them is where projects live or die, and one quiet decision controls the size of that gap, the cutoff grade. This is the minimum grade of rock worth putting through the plant. Ore above the cutoff is treasure. Rock below it, even if it holds real gold, becomes waste, hauled off and dumped forever. The line is not fixed by geology. It is set by economics. Because that line moves, the whole deposit breathes with the gold price. When gold rises, you can afford to process poorer rock, so the cutoff drops and the reserve suddenly grows, sometimes overnight, without a single new meter drilled. When gold falls, the cutoff climbs and rock that was ore yesterday turns to waste today. Half a deposit can vanish from the books on a price swing. When gold crashed from roughly $1,900 in 2011 to under $1,100 by late 2015, miners across the industry rewrote their reserve statements downward, and Barrick Gold alone took write-downs exceeding $10 billion over that stretch. The mine did not change. The math did. Even with a rich reserve on paper, no gold moves until the state says yes, and the state takes its time. Permitting a modern mine can take 7 to 15 years, longer than it takes to build a city. The Pebble Project in Alaska, one of the largest undeveloped copper-gold deposits on the planet, has been fighting for permits since the early 2000s and was blocked by the Environmental Protection Agency in 2020 over threats to the Bristol Bay salmon fishery. During those years, the company spends and earns nothing. Many promising projects simply die in the waiting room, their owners running out of patience or cash before the paperwork clears. The paperwork is not bureaucracy for its own sake. An environmental impact assessment is legally required, a study of everything the mine will touch. Before a permit is granted, the company must prove where its water will come from, how it will store its toxic waste, and how it will one day close the mine and heal the land. Water plans, tailings plans, closure plans, all approved first. A single unanswered question about a downstream river can freeze $1 billion project indefinitely. Regulators often demand a closure bond, tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars set aside up front, so that if the company walks away, the land can still be rehabilitated at someone else's expense. Clear all that, and the real spending begins, because now you have to build the mine itself. A large modern mine costs more than $1 billion to construct before it recovers a single ounce. Newmont's Marion mine in Suriname ran close to $1 billion, and the Cerro Casal and Pascualama projects on the Chile-Argentina border ballooned past $8 billion in projected costs before construction stalled entirely. Pits must be dug, plants erected, power lines run into the wilderness. And every ton of ore comes buried under waste. The strip ratio measures this. The tons of worthless rock move to expose 1 ton of ore. A high strip ratio, sometimes 10 tons of waste for every ton of ore, can quietly double the cost of every gram. With that much capital sunk into the ground, the clock on repayment starts ticking hard. Payback periods commonly run 3 to 7 years, meaning the mine must sell gold steadily for years just to return the money it took to build. Only after that does anyone see profit. The investors are not buying a mine. They are lending against a future that has to arrive exactly on schedule. Once the mine is running, the biggest daily enemy is not the rock. It is electricity. Gold is locked in stone so hard it must be shattered to powder before chemistry can reach it. This process, called comminution, can devour up to 40% of the entire mine's energy budget. Crushing and grinding rock is one of the most energy-hungry industrial acts on the planet, and by some estimates, the crushing and grinding of ore worldwide consumes close to 3% of all electricity generated on Earth. The machines that do it run without rest. Ball mills and sag mills, vast rotating drums the size of buildings, tumble the ore with steel balls until it becomes a fine gray slurry. A single large sag mill can measure 12 meters across and draw 20 megawatts of power, enough to light a small town. They hum day and night, and they are always hungry for power. In most mines, energy is the single largest operating cost, which means the price of diesel and grid electricity, decided in markets far from the pit, reaches straight into the mine and squeezes its margin. Once the rock is ground to powder, the gold still has to be coaxed out of it, and for that, the industry turns to a poison. Since the 1880s, the MacArthur Forest process has used cyanide to dissolve gold, pulling microscopic specks into solution where they can be recovered. Patented in 1887 by John Stuart MacArthur and the Forest brothers in Glasgow, it transformed the Witwatersrand goldfields of South Africa within a decade and remains the backbone of the industry more than a century later. It is astonishingly effective. It is also lethal, and every gram of it must be controlled with obsessive care. That control shapes the whole back end of the mine. Low-grade ore too poor for the mill is often heap leached, stacked in great mounds and trickled with cyanide solution that slowly seeps the gold out. And the leftover slurry, the spent poisoned rock, has to go somewhere. It is pumped into tailings, dams, engineered lakes of toxic waste held back by earthen walls. When one of those dams fails, the disaster is measured in dead rivers and dead people. In 2000, a tailings dam at Baia Mare in Romania burst and sent 100,000 cubic meters of cyanide-laced water into the Tisa and Danube rivers, killing fish across 4 countries. The chemistry that makes gold mining possible is also its darkest liability. So with all these costs stacked together, how does an honest miner measure whether any of it works? For years, the industry hid behind flattering numbers that counted only the cost of digging. Then in 2013, the World Gold Council introduced the All-in Sustaining Cost, the AISC, a figure designed to tell the truth. The truth it tells is sobering. AISC folds in not just mining and processing, but the sustaining capital needed to keep the operation alive, the ongoing spending that never stops. Across the industry, AISC averages somewhere around $1,200 to $1,400 per ounce. Against a gold price of $2,000, that sounds comfortable. It is not. It means a large slice of every ounce is eaten before profit begins, and the margin is far thinner than the headline gold price suggests. And one of the biggest bites in that cost has nothing to do with rock or chemistry. It is people. Gold hides in remote, hostile places, deserts and Arctic tundra and jungle, far from any town. So workers are flown in and flown out on rotating rosters, weeks on site followed by weeks away. The FIFO life is grueling, and it is expensive. Every part of that remoteness inflates the bill. Labor alone can account for 30 to 50% of operating costs. Skilled operators command high wages to work in the middle of nowhere. Diesel must be trucked or barged across enormous distances to feed haul trucks the size of houses. A single Caterpillar 797 haul truck weighs over 250 tons empty, costs around $5 million, and burns hundreds of liters of diesel an hour. The digging itself is almost the cheap part. It is the getting people and fuel to the digging that breaks budgets. Now hold all of that in your mind and watch what a single gram does to it. Take ore grading 3 grams per ton. At $2,000 an ounce, 1 ton of that rock yields roughly $180 of gold. Healthy, workable, profitable. Now drop the grade to 1 gram per ton. The same ton now yields only about $60. Here's the cruelty of it. The cost to process that tonne did not change. Crushing costs the same. Grinding costs the same. The cyanide, the electricity, the labor, all identical, because you are still moving and treating 1 full tonne of rock. Only the gold inside it shrank. Your revenue collapsed by 2/3 while your costs held perfectly still. That is how a mine bleeds to death without a single thing appearing to go wrong. This is not a hypothetical. It happens to real projects, and it destroys them. A promising deposit gets re-drilled, the assays come back lower than the first estimate, and the reserve is downgraded. Overnight, billions of dollars in market value evaporate, or the gold price simply dips, and suddenly AISC sits above the revenue per ounce. Every tonne mined now loses money. When that happens, the only rational move is to stop. Across the world sit orphan deposits, fully explored, sometimes fully permitted, holding real gold that everyone agrees is there. And they are never built. The grade is a shade too low, or the price a shade too weak, and the numbers refuse to close. The treasure is real. The profit is not. Miners who survive this volatility do so with a set of hard-learned tricks. The first is high grading. When a mine opens, operators often mine the richest zones first, deliberately, to pull cash out of the ground fast and pay back that crushing capital debt before anything can go wrong. It leaves the poorer ore for later, betting the mine survives long enough to reach it. The second trick reaches into the future. Through forward hedging, a miner can lock in the price of gold it has not yet dug, selling tomorrow's ounces at today's agreed price. It sacrifices the upside of a rally in exchange for certainty, and certainty is what lets a mine keep its promises to the bank. Hedging can also destroy a company that guesses wrong. Ashanti Goldfields nearly collapsed in 1999 when gold spiked and its hedge book swung to a paper loss of over $500 million, forcing an emergency restructuring. The third trick is blending, mixing rich and poor ore together so the mill receives a steady, predictable grade instead of lurching between feast and famine. A stable feed is a stable mine, but even with every trick deployed, the fundamental gamble never goes away. A gold mine is a bet placed across decades. Mine lives commonly stretch 10 to 30 years, and over that span grade, price and cost must stay aligned the entire time. Any one of them can betray you. At industry average grades, the profit margin is razor thin, a sliver that a bad year in any market can erase completely. So return to the deposit we began with, that million ounces worth over $2 billion on paper. Now you understand why it can still ruin its owner. The value assumes the grade holds, the price holds, the energy stays cheap, the dam never breaks, and the permit ever arrives. Change any one of those, and the fortune inverts. Geology, underground eyes, not profit. It is a promise, conditional and fragile, that everything will line up for 20 years straight. Sometimes it does, and the mine becomes a monument to patience and nerve. Far more often, the treasure stays exactly where nature left it, too poor, too remote, or too late. If this pulled back the curtain on the strange economics beneath our feet, consider subscribing so the next story finds you.